Good morning. Let's look at some of the major stories which have moved the market so far this morning. And Brexit, of course, is one of the major headlines. We are seeing some real ugly moves in terms of cable. We've got cable trading down 137, around 137.40s, or double bottomed down at around that 137.40s. But to be perfectly honest, it's double bottomed about 6 times in the last 3 days, where every single one of them I've called as a double bottom and a bit of a bounce. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to this one, to be perfectly honest. But let's look at why we're seeing some of these movements, and really I'm a little bit confused about why we've seen such big moves over the last couple of days. When we look at Tuesday and we saw Jerome Powell and what he said, that really, from his speech, we knew he was going to toe the line. We knew he was going to stay very much in line with what the FOMC meeting minutes had already said from the previous meeting, that meeting at the start of February. So we knew all of this was going to be the case, that we wouldn't see anything necessarily different. Now, what Jerome Powell did say is he came out and told us that the interest rates would probably still move higher, despite the interest rate issues, but we'd still known that, but he kind of put a little bit more of a hard line into that. But none of that was away from expectations, and more importantly, none of that was different to anything else that we'd already seen or already heard over the last 24 hours or so, or even previous to that. So we still saw quite a big market move. Now you can almost say, okay, it was a new Fed chair, there was a little bit of change, it was kind of felt a little bit different, so that was why we got a bit of a market move. But yesterday, with these Brexit headlines and the EU paper coming out, this hard line on Northern Ireland, which still looks to be in place, none of that was any different to what was expected. And did any of us really expect Theresa May to stand up and say, yes, I accept everything that is within this paper? No, I don't think we did. So the fact that the markets have been so spooked by this situation, I find crazy, really, because there's nothing necessarily different. Now, the big worry for this is, of course, this is Northern Ireland, and the Northern Irish issue is huge. We thought we'd kind of got around it from a UK standpoint, and how the UK were going to approach Northern Ireland with the EU. But what this has done, and what the information from Barnier and the EU has really told us, is that it doesn't necessarily matter what we decide as a nation to do about the EU, the Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland border. It only depends on what the EU are willing to do about it, and they are sticking firm. They are saying, look, something needs to be decided here, or Northern Ireland have to stay within the customs union. But as we know, that causes huge issues in the UK. We can't have Northern Ireland stay within that customs union, because we would then have to change the type of Brexit that we have for various different parts of the country. So Scotland, Northern Ireland, all of these different areas, it's going to be very, very difficult to manage. So that's going to be a huge issue. So it's not necessarily a surprise what's going on, but again, this has always been the case when we've seen such big falls on cable and in sterling. The issue here is there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is no answer to where we are with this. Post-Brexit Britain is still has a huge question mark around it. We have no idea what that is going to look like. And unfortunately, I don't think David Davis or Theresa May have any idea what that's going to look like. And neither do the EU and Michel Barnier. Of course, the biggest thing here is that the EU don't want the UK to leave. And they will do anything that they can to push us to another referendum or make it as difficult as they possibly can. Now, anyone who's been trying to say previously that Brexit is going to be easy for us to deal with and the EU are going to give us what we want, it doesn't matter if Theresa May and the UK government are going to put a hard line or a hard Brexit. It doesn't really make any difference. It only matters what the EU and how their stance is going to be. So. But there's still so many unanswered questions, and it is those unanswered questions, it is that absolute uncertainty which causes the sort of movements that we're seeing here on markets at the moment. Now, cable has fallen down. As I said, we are double bottoming at these lows coming in from early in January, I think around about the 11th or 12th of January. These lows at 137.40. That's the area that we are at the moment. Now, I mentioned that we had a couple of other double bottom areas Previously, one of those was at 137.95, one higher than that, 138.55. We looked at both of those areas as key areas of support. And key areas where we could see this hold up. But yesterday just went through all of them, didn't show any signs of holding up. Now, we are in this downtrend on the 4-hourly cable chart. We are in this downtrend. We've had 4 tests of an upside of the trend line on the upside. So every time we go up there, we are falling back down lower. It's what also we saw yesterday around this break of that 138.55 level was a break of a downside trend line, because we were narrowing in a little bit in terms of that 4-hourly cable chart. It was giving us a bit of a wedge formation, which usually is a continuation pattern. We would see that if we were going by the textbooks, we would see a breakout to the upside and a move higher from that, because that was in a continuous uptrend. But it has broken out lower than that, and it does look particularly negative at the moment. Now, we do have data this morning, so it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. And I'll just get that data up just to have a look at the expectations for what we've got there. And we have got consumer credit numbers coming out, mortgage approvals coming out. This video will probably go live after those numbers have come out, but we will see that those numbers come this morning. So again, it's not likely that there's going to be too much emphasis put on these numbers. They're not exactly massive numbers, apart from the market manufacturing PMI number, which is due out. But apart from that, they're not enormous numbers for us to keep an eye out for. But this cable is particularly jittery at the moment. Now, you do have the US dollar upside, which is not helping here. So when you add that US dollar upside to the negativity around sterling, it really does point to particular negativity around this. But this look at some of these other stories which have been moving around, a look at where some of these other markets have been going over the last 24 hours or so. I mean, looking at equity markets, a pretty ugly finish, to be perfectly honest, overnight on equity markets. We saw particularly big moves: Dow off 380 points, S&P off 30 points, Nasdaq off 57. Overnight in Asia, Nikkei was off 350 odd points. Slightly higher Hang Seng, but still particularly negative overall. So we are seeing that. And then first thing this morning, we're seeing pretty negative moves in terms of European equity markets as well. So it's not looking particularly clever out there. Looking at bond prices, looking at that US 10-year, has jumped to 2 points. If I can find it here, 2.84. So that has jumped to 2.84. Not necessarily surprising when we see the sort of movements that we've seen on equity markets and in the US dollar over the last 24 hours or so. But there's a lot. Today's almost going to be a bit of a lull, despite there's going to be data later. We have got US data coming out. We've got personal consumption numbers. We've got the initial jobless claims. Obviously, it is the first week of March, or the first day of March today, but we don't have the payrolls this week. We've got the non-farm payroll, and the US jobs report will come out next week. But still doesn't mean that Friday is going to be particularly quiet, because we still do see a lot of data coming out. Most importantly, of course, that Theresa May speech. That's going to be the key one that we focus on. She's going to almost kind of put her retort to what came out from the EU yesterday, so that's going to be important. And then tomorrow is the second time that Jerome Powell will testify as well. So that's going to be another important part for us to really focus on. But in terms of that, we've got the European equity markets off. We've got bonds slightly higher. We've got the dollar trading slightly higher. We've got cable testing that low level. Let me just talk you through some of the others. We've got euro dollar trading at its lows at the moment, down at 121.85s. Gold trading down at 13.1075. We've got dollar yen trading kind of in the middle of its range, 107.74s. 106.74s. Oil price 61.64 at the moment. So we do have some of those movers, but as we say, those sterling areas are the particularly negative ones. Sterling yen trading 146.70. That's falling, looking to come down to those. That's at the low of the session so far today. So we are seeing some pretty big moves that we can't leave without telling you where Bitcoin is either. That's 10,541. So there are movements around there. We have to focus though on some of these comments still from Brexit. That's going to be the real focus that we can't really get away from. But for now, we are seeing a particularly negative morning all over the place, especially from a UK point of view. But those figures could well help us a little bit later.